Broke, don't need a four heater, but you can 4 feet approach me. I'm summoning focus of Gogeta. Slight work, so imagine me chilling when folks meet up, cause my.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Let us discuss the tweet that Taya Valkyrie put out where she says that age should never be considered and that she is not old, even though she's 38. Here's the thing. She is both right and wrong at the same time. She's right when you accept that being 38 years old on the planet Earth is not old. It's not old at all. I mean, you're not even 40. If the average person lives to be 60 something, you've lived about a little over half your life. All right, that's it. You still got a good 30 to 40 years left, of mobility and being virile. She can still have kids and all that kind of stuff. She's not old. She's not completely a midwife. Not yet. But in sports, she's ancient. In sports, she's old as hell. Now, again, in wrestling, it's been said, and it should be said, should be continue to be said, that in wrestling and in athletics, you can find these anomalies of people who can still perform in their 40s like they did when they were in their early 30s or when they were in their mid 20s. In some ways you're going to be a little bit better because you're going to be a little bit more seasoned. Like I think AJ Styles got better the older he got. His psychology got better. He slowed down a little bit. He started doing a little bit less. He prolongs his matches better. He, understands character and promos and different things like that a lot better. He got better with age. A lot of people get worse with age. They start gaining weight. There are sports injuries, which is usually what they'll say. Because, in the United States, you can't fire people for being a certain age, right? You can't use age as a reason to fire people. It's one of those protected classes, much like race and gender and sexuality and all that kind of stuff. So they're not going to say it was age, but you can look at the theme and look at the average ages of some of these people. Now, of course, they threw some like a Zeta Ramir in there, and she's like in her early to mid 20s. So it can't be all age. But look at the top people that they released: Keith Lee, Karrion Kross, Taya Valkyrie. What does all those people have in common? All those people are over the age of 35. They went through NXT. Some of them even signed NXT contracts after they were 36. So you're talking about people basically starting their WWE careers in the middle of their life. It's a completely different ballgame, man. The NBA, it wouldn't happen. NFL, they wouldn't even consider it. You ain't played football since high school and you think you're about to just jump on this team? What's the likelihood of that? It's not likely at all. And when you compare it to the mainstream sports, I'm not going to say real sports, let's say mainstream sports. NFL, NBA, I'm guessing soccer is the same way. There's fresh college students coming into these leagues every single year. So if you're 34, 35-year-old journeyman basketball player, it's going to be harder for you to find a job. Of course it is. You've been playing for a decade already. Maybe 15, 16 seasons already. They're going to be looking for the replacement. They're going to be looking for somebody else. And sure, there's going to be your Tom Brady's in the NFL or your LeBron James in the NBA where these guys are superstars and it doesn't matter how old they are as long as they can still perform. Yeah, there's going to be guys like the Brett Favres and stuff like that. There's going to be some of those guys. But they're going to be few and far between. Most of the people, they're trying to get you out of there by the time you're 38. I can't even imagine there being a 38-year-old football player right now. I know Tom Brady's probably 40-something, but he's also a quarterback. I couldn't imagine being a 38-year-old linebacker or a 38-year-old offensive lineman. That's probably hard, man, because you ain't got the same spring in your step that a 28-year-old does. And he ain't got the same spring in his step that a fresh out of college 22-year-old does. So, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, that kind of explosiveness, that kind of energy to bring to the product. of the NFA, NBA, and the NFL. WWE tries to do something similar. They talk about this a lot. With Nick Khan, he talks about this kind of stuff where they want to bring in classes. They want to go out and find athletes, people who didn't quite live up to expectations in collegiate wrestling or collegiate football or collegiate basketball or something like that. But they still have athletic backgrounds. They're still teachable. Bring them into wrestling while they're still young and interested, and haven't had a ton of injuries and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes with football players, you do have those lingering injuries like the knees or the ankles or something like that. Because a lot of football guys, they fall out of the league because they can't get through the combine, which Colin Kaepernick says is a slave block. Because you're supposed to give a guy who had ankle surgery 2 years ago, he's 22 with like 10 ankle surgeries. You're supposed to give that guy $15 million or some shit like that. Colin Kaepernick doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's a fucking idiot. But that's my point. When WWE brings in a talent and finds out that talent is almost 40, everything that they're bringing in that talent for is going to be difficult. Let's take Keith Lee, for instance. They bring Keith Lee in. Keith Lee is 35 when they signed him or something. His metabolism is going to be a little bit different than he would have been if he was 25. That means if they want him to lose weight, it's going to be harder for him now. That means if he gets injured, it's going to be harder for him to come back. If he might have already had a series of injuries that he of course going to have to disclose those, as he, is going to make more money than he's ever made before. He's going to have to disclose if he had any surgeries to his knees, surgeries to his ankles, did he have any heart problems, which of course he ended up having some in 2021. Those things are going to really come up. And WWE does do combines, but it's kind of like, I think it's a work. Like they did a combine, what was it? I think it was a couple of years ago, and they had Bianca Belair really showing out in the combine, which I think is what everybody was kind of became impressed with her. And they do that. They want to know with your health history. They want to know if you got kids. They want to know what your schedule's been. How often have you worked? How often do you get sick? Do you have diabetes like somebody like Kyle O'Reilly? What is your medical history? Because they about to sink all this money into you, and the older you are, the more likely you are to have all of those problems. The older you are, the more likely you are to have had knee surgeries, back surgeries, issues with drugs and alcohol, arrests. All this kind of stuff comes with age. So yes, that's what they're looking at. And it's also going to be like, if you're 40, it's going to be harder for you to train. Because now you have to forget all the things you were doing before you got here. And that's the big issue with WWE and they always just call it bad habits. Whenever you hear WWE and Bruce Pritchard or somebody like that says that people on the independents learn bad habits, they basically mean that there's shit that they pick up on the indies that they can't get rid of because they've been doing it for so long. It reminds me, I like to use in mainstream sports. I don't know how many of you are homeboys, but there was a basketball player called Skip to My Lou. He was a street ball player. And I'll never forget, he finally made it to the NBA. And he started pulling street ball moves in the middle of the NBA game. And got hit with a traveling call. Because there is no traveling in the street ball. You can do whatever you want. You could double, you could travel, you could do whatever you want. But in the NBA, there are rules. And he forgot where he was. He had a bad habit of playing street ball, so that was his thing. He played street ball in the NBA. And it was the funniest shit. And I don't even watch basketball, but I remember seeing it because I watched basketball at the time. And it was the funniest shit. This is back when they were trying to integrate street ball players into the NBA. Stephon Marbury and all those guys, right? Some of them couldn't actually shake the bad habits. Being a street ball player was very different from being an NBA player. It takes two different skill sets. And everybody realized that. And it wasn't exactly age, but it speaks to my point of when you're on the independents, the fans want to see a certain thing. They enjoy a certain kind of product on the independents. A certain presentation, a certain way of doing things, language, choking, these kind of things that WWE is like, no, 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 no. You can't do that. Can't be cursing. Can't go around choking people. You know, this is why you have Kevin Owens where it's you know, his ROH was kill, sting, kill. They're not saying kill in WWE. You can forget it. So, and then they have to change his name. So it's going to be Fight Owens Fight. Not kill, sting, kill, which sounds a lot more badass. But Fight Owens Fight. Because fight is less violent than kill. It's more family friendly than kill. But you have to be able to adapt. And some people cannot adapt. And some people, when they look at you and they say that you're 40, it's a lot to ask you to adapt. And yes, I do understand that Robert Roode is probably 38 as well. But you look at Robert Roode. Look at Finn Balor. Finn Balor is 40. Look at Finn Balor. Look at the physical specimen those two guys are compared to Keith Lee. You know, yes, they're smaller, you know, but they don't have the health problems. They're in great shape. Why wouldn't you keep those kinds of 38-year-olds around rather than keep 38-year-old Keith Lee, who is essentially starting over from scratch? We can't find a character for him, personality for him. And then if he does get over, how long before he goes down? You know? And who knows? You might only have like 2 or 3 years. This is why, just to veer off subject for a little bit, because I'm not going to be doing a lot of videos. So I'm going to try to cover a lot of ground. This is what the thing with AEW is about. If AEW starts bringing in the Kevin Owenses and the Sami Zayns and the Kyle O'Reillys and the Keith Lees and the Karrion Crosses, which Cross will never go to AEW because Tony Khan probably would never sign him. Which is like because his fan base hates him. But that kind of stuff, when all those guys go over there, understand that roster immediately gets old as hell. So in 5 years, you'll have how many guys in their mid-40s? You'll have CM Punk will probably be closer to 50 than 40. Danielson will be closer to 50 than 40. Kevin Owens, mid-40s. Sami Zayn, mid-40s. Keith Lee, mid-40s. You know, that's how WWE is thinking. In 5 years, how many of these guys are still going to be around? You know, like they had that anomaly called Batista once. You know, he was like Diamond Dallas Page, where he was, you know, a guy who got in his mid-30s and made the most of it. Mainly because he had a sponsor, just like DDP. You know, DDP was friends with Bischoff, and he made friends with Randy Savage, and he made friends with Hall and Nash. He was friends with them before, you know, when they were jobbers. So they took care of him. When they got on, he got on. Batista fell in with Triple H. You know, they brought him up with him. If you're 38 and you don't have those kind of connections, it's hard. You know, you're essentially starting from scratch. And it's no real sports, mainstream sports league is going to ask you to do that. It's just not going to give you the job. So I'm not surprised Taya got cut. I am, and she's not wrong. Again, if in everyday life, if you meet a 38-year-old woman, she's not old. She's a little experienced, but she's not old. But in sports, she's fucking ancient, and everybody knows it. So people who are like, age shouldn't matter, you're a liar, man. This is a sports league. You're a liar. When you got 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds trying to get in, and you keeping this 38-year-old around, you got to ask yourself why. What's the point? Even if it's name value, even if it's buzz, even if it's name value, how long before that shit die out? The moment it hits the main roster and nobody knows who you are. He's like, I've been in the business for 20 years. It's like, sure, but you ain't been in here in 20 years. So nobody knows who you are. You have to start all the way over. And that's another ego check. Because with the exception of a few people, guys come in and they're virtually unknown. So that means you have to start over from scratch. And you've been doing this for a long, long time. So I feel bad for her, you know, because I like Taya. You know, I thought she was cool. I watched her in AAA. I watched her in Impact. I get what she means by she's not old. She just like Mickie James. Mickie James had that same attitude. I'm not old. I can still do this. But the thing is, man, you can still do it, but they're looking for somebody who can get in on the ground floor and run for 5, 6, 10 years. You know, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for horses. you're not quite there. You know, you're a little over the hill for that. You know, you're still good, but you just be good somewhere else. All right, like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.
Your skin tone, so why attach yourself and piggyback the wealth you didn't earn or lack yourself? I'm telling you to own up to your own success and failures. It's a reason why these sleazy guys